So update on ProgPal. Hudson did have a discussion there with the core devs, and he mentioned 2 weeks ago that ProgPal, unfortunately, is going to probably mean some sort of delay due to the fact that they're still trying to finalize the contract due to the late dropping out of the hardware auditor. And so as a result, until that contract is finalized, the people who are willing to stump up the cash to fund it weren't going to do so. So I don't know where it's gone from there. I expect we'll probably hear something in the core devs call on the 21st before we get to our next meeting on the 25th. That's all I know on that at the moment. You don't know any more, Tim, do you?
No, I don't.
Yeah, no,
I guess the only thing, yeah, it seems extremely unlikely that ProgPal is in Istanbul at this point. But that's just based on my reading of the tea leaves and nothing else.
I would say it's absolutely extremely unlikely. Especially because they haven't started auditing, and the time it takes to audit is not going to allow for it to meet the deadline. The next item, the hard fork coordination update. Again, the core devs are currently going through all the various ERPs that are being proposed. Certainly the last meeting must have felt very frustrating for a lot of the core devs. Unfortunately, a lot of the champions for the ERPs weren't on the call, so it was really difficult to negotiate the validity of the EIP. People gave their views, notes were taken, but no decisions were made. So I know there was a lot of discussion in the core devs Gitter channel afterwards, but as it currently stands, apart from the dates that are in place, no ERPs have officially been approved to move forward, from what I understand. Tim?
I guess I wonder if there's something the cat herders could do to help make this process better. So on one hand, I feel like it's kind of been a mess, and a lot of the core devs and EAP editors are spending sort of their valuable time trying to unmess most of this. So maybe the cat herders could be helpful in a way. I guess the counter argument to that is I'm not sure adding like another middleman or middle group in that process will help. But to me, it just feels like one of the most, I guess, disorganized or chaotic parts of the process right now, not based on like anyone's work, but just because there's never been so many suggestions and it's clearly like overwhelming the infrastructure we have to deal with EAPs, right? I feel like our workflow worked when you get 5-10 EAPs proposed, then you narrow it down to 3 to 5 or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I'm not sure what's the best approach, but yeah.
In your opinion, what would be the main issue as of today, based on the last call?
So there's a few things. One is just that like it wasn't clear until the EAP submission deadline what the expectation was. So how fully fleshed out should the EAPs be? How many were actually submitted? So we kind of went from like more or less 0 to, I don't know, no, say like more or less 10 to like 30 on the last day. And they're all at different stage of discussion. So some of them are literally placeholders or not more than that. And some of them are like fully fleshed out things, with like ProgPal being an example that has a running testnet, right? So I think that's one issue. Like it's not clear what was expected by that date. And it seemed like there was this cutoff date, so everyone just pushed stuff in. I think the second issue is just like the overhead it takes to technically discuss these. So there's been an initiative to have AMAs on the Gitter channel, which seems to have worked kind of well. But yeah, just like like it takes time to wrap your head around these, and there's a lot of competing ones. So having like the technical discussion And I think the third issue, and this is kind of speaking as just like a client implementer, is that we're supposed to have our implementations complete more or less in 1 month. So like on July 19th. And speaking for like Pantheon, we have 0 EAPs implemented because 0 are marked as accepted.
Accepted. Exactly right.
So if we get 10 that are marked as accepted 5 days before July 19th, obviously that deadline will slip.
Absolutely. To tell you the truth, Tim, I agree with you 100%. What I found with the last meeting is that they tried to get through all of them, and with so many on the table, I really do feel that we need to engage with the champions of each one and break them down into a list of 10 so that we can discuss 10 in a core dev meeting and get those over the line, and then move on to the next 10, and then move on to the next 10, and almost to a point where if the champion is not present to defend his EAP, then a hard call needs to be made to drop that EAP for Istanbul, because as you say, there's just an incredible number to try and push through in a very short space of time.
Yeah, and I think it's also, sorry, one more thing that's just worth highlighting is the biggest like hard fork in the past had, I don't know, like 5-ish EAPs in it. So if we are going to a case where like we might have like 7 to 10 EAPs, what does that look like? Is that something we want? That's more of a core devs discussion, but it seems like we might get a hard fork with twice as many features as all the previous ones. Yeah.
Okay. So for the very first time, we have a problem of having to somehow manage a funnel, and right? So you said many of the AIPs were at different stages. So that could be a very clear criteria of, deciding which ones should be considered and which ones are not yet, at that stage.
Yeah.
But I don't know how we would do that.
Yeah, and that's a double-edged sword. So some of the less formed EAPs right now were, for example, the state rent ones were arguably, there's like the most technical work behind that's been done. It just hasn't been like formatted to an EAP to some extent. But so there was this post on ETH Magicians that I'm trying to pull up around like shorter versus longer hard forks. And Dano from our team added something around maybe we should have like a different cutoff around like, first of all, when your EAPs gets submitted as like an idea, and then when it gets submitted as like a spec, and then when it gets implemented. So right now, this like concept of an idea and a spec are tied together.
Yeah. So that would be, so again, I think we need to create this sort of funnel and to clearly define the stages of each one of the phases of the funnel, right? So that it's also transparent and everyone knows what it's to be expected in each one of these stages. Also, how do you? So during the all core devs call, do you discuss EAPs on a rolling basis, or is it just do you discuss all at once when you get to the deadline? How does that work?
So typically the way it would work is that people, the EAPs champions would signal that they want an EAP discussed in a core devs call, and we would discuss it. So that would be like on a fairly rolling basis, and a fairly small number of EAPs. What happened last time is just we got to the deadline and there were still 30-ish like EAPs that were not accepted or rejected. And so we discussed them all because they hadn't been discussed.
And unfortunately, we try to discuss them all without any of the champions being present to discuss them. Well, not any, most of them, some were there.
Yeah, but that would be like two different issues, right? So one issue would be how do we classify EAPs so that we make sure that we only discuss those that are sufficiently developed. And the second one would be if like maybe enforcing some sort of rule whereby if the champion is not present or someone representing the champion, then it doesn't make sense, right? To even discuss it. Would such a rule make sense or not?
I'm not sure I understand what you're proposing.
So in terms
so I think what
of
Hugo's,
yeah, go ahead, please.
what I'm thinking Hugo's trying to say is basically he's trying to say we need to define if an EAP is ready to progress or not into Istanbul. If it's not, then it needs to be put on the back burner because, as you say, there's a couple that are just not ready yet. And then the second one he was saying is if a champion is not there at the core dev call to actually talk to their EAP, then that EAP should not be discussed at all during the core dev call.
Yeah, I guess I would caveat those two things. Like they seem like good ideas, but you probably want that decision to be made on core devs and not by
Absolutely,
us.
absolutely
Yeah,
agreed. It's
But
something that I guess
yeah,
in discussion we probably want to raise with Hudson and bring it to his attention, and then he can raise it as an issue within the core devs.
yeah, at the very least, we can post it on the core devs Giller and start the conversation there in advance, so that doesn't take most of the call.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. So I was actually asking whether or not that made some sense to you or not. Because at the end, the way I see this is as sort of a creation problem, right? So too many APs all at once. And so what we want to find is ways for that not to happen again. And I was saying that there's like two different problems. One problem is, whether we have a sufficiently developed spec so that the AP can be implemented. And the other is, how are we supposed to actually have a proper discussion about that if the champion is not from the call, which are two very different problems.
Yeah, and we should try and address both of those. They both make sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll. I'll drop something in first internally and.
Also, sorry. So yeah, I'm just thinking about this whole thing. So on one side we have the creation problem. Then you said that there is also, having technical discussions that this is a process that takes a lot of overhead. And then there was also an issue you said about timing, which is, if all of a sudden we need to implement 7 or 8 APs for, one network upgrade, then, how fast we can develop those and integrate them in the clients, which are also things to discuss. So, and I'm just throwing ideas here, but maybe we should have a discussion on whether there should be a cap in terms of how many EIPs can get into a network upgrade, and maybe say something like it's 5, and first 5 in are the ones that take into account or not, or we should set up some sort of process to decide which ones are in and which ones are out. And about the technical discussion taking too much overhead, if all of a sudden there's one all core dev call where we have to discuss 10 AP at once, maybe it makes some sense to bring that discussion out of the call and have it like in a separate, I don't know, separate call.
So that mostly happens right now. So every EAPS has like a discussions queue field that typically points to ETH magicians or something, and a lot of the technical discussion happens there. There's still some of it happening on the call, right? Like, but so far, I'd say 90% probably happens outside of the core devs call.
Exactly right.
Okay. Yeah, just throwing ideas.
I think out of this, just for clarity and benefit, I guess, summarizing what we just said, I'm going to drop a note in the Ethereum Catter's internal getter, just to Spectacular, to Hudson, and just basically say to him, we've noticed that from the last call that there's a staggering amount of ERPs, in fact more ERPs than we've had for any hard fork ever. We also noticed that a lot of the ERPs at various stages of development. And finally, we've noted that a lot of the champions weren't present at the call. Is there anything that the ECH can assist with to try and smooth out the current process, because there appears to be a lot of jagged edges.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, cool.
Maybe it makes sense to have a discussion internally with the cat holders and bring the proposal to the core devs for the proposals to decide whether or not to go ahead with it.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, and I guess the reason why I'm bringing it to Hudson is he is the current moderator for the core devs call, so he's playing both sides of the fence.
Great.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Updates on the action items for Constantinople post-mortem. I think Charles was going to send through an update. He hasn't yet, so I can't talk to that, unfortunately. William and Pooja are also not available, so we'll move on to the next item. The Open ECH GitHub issues. Now, this is something that I guess has been overlooked a little bit by the cat herders. There are a few issues outstanding, and some of them date back a little while. Others are just issues that I think could probably be closed off pretty quickly, and probably worth having a look at this, probably with a few more cat herders on the call. But I'll put through the link just for all the issues that are currently outstanding for those that are interested. And it includes things like increasing the multi-sig security for our Ethereum cat herder wallet, which is managed by Hudson, Lane, and Charles. The documenting of the live streaming for the core dev calls. Currently, there's very few people that know how to do this, and if we could document it, it could make it perhaps a little bit easier at times when, for example, yourself, Tim, go and take on the job of managing the core dev calls, and someone has to do the video recording of that or at least the live streaming of it for the community. And then there's quite a few actually put through by Hudson. Things like figure out the next time and location in-person meeting. I think that's been settled, has it, for Toronto? Is that right, Tim?
So there's not going to be one for Ethereum 1.0. So it's just going to be an async call, it seems.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, for these issues, I'm happy to go through them and try and like ping people on old ones to see if they're still relevant, and yeah, at the very least, just like filter through them. Yeah, so hopefully we can close a couple or get them moving again. Yeah, so happy to do that.
Absolutely. I noticed there are a couple of calls that or items that might even be joined. I mean, I'm looking at 68 and 72. oh, actually, 68. Basically saying that we've now got an Ethereum cat herder email. Perhaps going forward, all the meeting requests should come from that rather than from Helen. I think that's a great idea, and it allows anyone to manage that within the cat herders rather than one specific person who may not be available. So that's an easy one to close off. And then the F2 phase 2 implementers core that Lane's just put up, that again deals with the whole subject of the Ethereum 2 and where we can potentially assist with that as a project. I think at the moment the closest we've got to it is along with Michael and Peter assisting to do meeting notes or volunteering to do that. But it's probably best that some of the Ethereum cat herders that are interested in getting involved have a sit down and maybe form a working group around things that we can do to assist these guys, because we know they do want to do things like have a multi-client test net, and it does mean that there will need some sort of coordination. There are various stages and certainly various levels of release. Some are testnet, some are not. So even documenting that process so everyone understands where everyone is in terms of being on the same page, and then knowing who's going to be ready for the first release of phase 0 and who's not, and drawing a line in the sand and helping them do that. So I think that's something that certainly we can look at doing, and probably again an action item. I'll drop a notes within the getter, ask who's interested, and maybe set up a working group meeting for that.
I'm really happy to work and help with that.
Awesome. Thank you, Hugo. Okay, I think we'll leave that section for where it is now. Moving on to the funding, accounting, and multisig. You would have seen that, those looking at the Getter channel would have seen there's been some discussion just with regards to the funding and the receiving of, I guess, the additional funding from Gitcoin or whatever it is.
Gitcoin, yeah. I think everything was cleared out, right?
Has it now been processed and pushed through?
I think so. I think that's what I read on Gitter.
Okay, perfect. Well, that's great. If that's happened, that's really exciting. So now we have a little bit more money to actually do stuff. We just had to find good projects to award the money to, or at least a piece of work that we are interested in doing.
Maybe we can ask a question on Gitter, but I would say that that item can be cleared out. But perfect. Let's ask just in case.
Yeah. Okay. Next one, the update on the Ethereum development portal. That's with Charles, so I can't speak to that. The website design, Hugo. Any updates on that? I know we're waiting on a document. I think Helen was going to draft.
Yeah.
Still waiting on that document.
No. So the only thing that was sort of urgent was to change the link that was pointing to the Ethereum wiki, and now it's pointing to the GitHub with all the IPs.
Perfect. That was for the Istanbul link, the next hard fork.
Yeah, that's done, and so it's clear. I just think that it's going to be difficult to try to brainstorm ideas on how the website should look like and what is the main role the website should play. So even though it's a few months from now, I really hope that maybe in Berlin or DEF CON we can get all together and maybe take some time to think about that, because
Yeah, that'll be really good. I think being able
yeah,
to catch up in Berlin would be super.
yeah,
I know that Lane said he would be there. Um, Charles, I think, suggested he might try and make it. But otherwise, we're all going to be going to DevCon in Osaka. But it's as good a time as any to get our heads together and sit down and work through some ideas.
yeah, totally. Let's see.
Excellent. Just now the next one, DevCon workshop. Tim. Tim,
Yeah,
are you going to come to Berlin?
to Berlin?
Yeah, for Berlin Blockchain Week.
No, I won't. But I will likely go to Osaka. Yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to chat about here. Basically, I guess the motivation is last year it felt like a lot of the talks at DevCon kind of happened behind closed doors. So there's like this, all these things happening while the talks are happening. And
Yes.
I think, and this year's like...
Are you talking about 1x?
Yeah. So that was an example. And I think like people started like working on things like the new syncing protocols, things like that.
Yep.
And this year's track seemed to be more organized around actually having like the core issues of Ethereum addressed. So there's one around 1x, there's one around 2.0, etc. And based on that, I think it could make sense to have like a workshop around Ethereum cat herders. What I had in mind is like workshops are supposed to be 2 hours. So maybe like a quick 15, 20 minutes intro of cat herders, what we've been doing and so on. And then having most of the workshop being open for people to suggest stuff we could do, to discuss how we would do it, how they could get involved, etc. Yeah, so I guess I'm curious, A, like, does anyone think this is like a very bad idea? And B, like any feedback, and C, who could potentially attend both, I guess, in person, and it'd probably be good to have at least one person remotely if we have like questions or whatever that are being done, not just from DEF CON.
Yep. Personally, I think having a workshop around the Ethereum cat herders and certainly the management and pushing of the project forward, it is super invaluable for the space. I'd love to see it take place. I hope something like that does get approved. In terms of how it goes down, certainly what we were talking about originally, as I said, the first 15 minutes or so being a bit of a town hall, and have a general breakdown and discussion from various players within the cat herders. And then in terms of how the workshop can work, I guess if we could have some clear goals that we'd like to try and achieve out of the workshop before we go into the workshop, and try and see if we can rally up to some support around those action items or goals, then I think that would be pretty useful.
Yeah, I agree. I like the idea, and especially like the idea of actually turning this thing into some way of getting feedback from the community and trying to understand what's the best way for us to help. I think that would be the main goal, and for that, maybe it makes sense to in the months leading to DEF CON, maybe the cat herders have to engage directly with core devs and ETH champions, etc. Just and ask them to come, and as you said, come up with some items we want to discuss, and take the opportunity to get as much feedback as we can, so that I think it's the best moment to do that.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm happy to put together like a proposal for a talk over the next week or so. I'll post it in the the Cat Herders channel to get all of your feedback on it and just get a feel for who could be there and not. And then we can send it in.
Yeah. I mean,
Perfect.
just quick poll. I would say Lane is definitely going to be there. Hudson's going to be there. You're going to be there. I think Charles is going to try and be there. I imagine.
I'm gonna try to be there.
Cool.
Yeah. Hugo, you're not going to make it.
I'm gonna try it.
You're going to try.
I can't say for sure, but I would love to. So yeah, hopefully I will.
Yeah. For me, DevCon is the conference. There's nothing bigger than DevCon, and I wish I could be there. That to me is just first goal. Okay. Any other business? Anything else that anyone wants to raise? Okay. I'll just, I know it's a bit late in the meeting. Nice to see Brent and Jim on the calls as well.
Thanks.
Brent and Jim are joining us just as community members. Wants to get more involved, potentially with the cat herders, looking to maybe in the future assist with note taking as a start, and going from there to even helping us and push some of the pieces of work forward.
Yep.
So thanks for joining us, Brent and Jim.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, pleasure, mate. So I'll just quickly do a review of the action items from meeting 12. Action 9.1, Hudson to work with Charles on making a post-ProgPower audit about the ProgPower audit. That post hasn't come out yet, only because they're still waiting on finalizing their contract. Action 9.4, multi-sig key holders to work on separating the funds. I believe that still hasn't been done. They haven't wanted to separate the funds until they got the final funds through. So once that's done, which you said, Hugo, they have, I suspect Lane and Hudson and Charles will start working on separating those funds. I'll chase up Charles just to see what's going on there. Action item 11.1, cat herders to review the document created by Pooja. I haven't done so myself, and I don't think anyone has, so I'll leave that up there for now. Action 11.3, set up a call with the Ethereum dev portal stakeholders. That's for Charles, and I can't comment on that. Action 12.1, Hudson to propose action plan for ProgPower hard fork delay, not making Istanbul in all core devs chat. So he has obviously raised it in the all core devs chat and explained the situation, but he did say he would have an update in the next core devs call, so I'll leave that up there for now. And then 12.2, continue to look into the discrepancy of the Gitcoin bounty amount. I believe that is now resolved, so I think we can take that off as a completed action item. And I think that's it, guys. If anyone's got anything else to add? Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Brett.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Brett, for leading this.
Thanks
No worries.
very much.
Take it easy. See ya.